So welcome everyone. My name is Samantha Bruno. I am the Career Services Coordinator here at Marxe Career Services. I'm joined with Suzanne Grossman, who's the Deputy Director of Career Services and Alumni Relations. We are so excited to have you for today's Alumni Career Chat with Faiza Asifuddin and Pam Fitzpatrick, who are both in ESG and sustainability. So we'll go ahead and start to kick it off. Faiza and Pam, if you could both, in about 10 minutes, introduce yourselves, your Marxe degree, your career trajectory, and how you got to where you are right now.
Sure. Pam, would you like to go ahead? No? Okay, great. I took myself about meat too fast. I'm Faiza Asifuddin. I graduated from Baruch with my MPA in 2015. And my trajectory has been kind of a little unique in that I graduated with a degree in poli-sci and women and gender studies from Marxe University in 2009. So it was like the height of the financial collapse. Didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that eventually I wanted to get my MPA. But when I talked to my dean, she was like, why don't you take a couple of years off and get some work experience in that? That will make sure that your whatever degree you decide to pursue will be that much more valuable because you'll have the work experience and the practical application of it. So I decided to join AmeriCorps, which is a national organization, kind of like a volunteer organization. And I was placed at a nonprofit in Harlem called Seedco, and there I was doing direct service, essentially providing or connecting low-income or unemployed individuals with public benefits, and then also providing financial education courses. And that was a great learning experience in like what I didn't want to do. So while I was there, I learned that there was just like a deep disconnect between like policy and application. And so I wanted to be on the policy side of things and really try and help bridge that gap between like what's actually happening on the ground and what's happening in headquarters when people are coming up with these policies or programs. So I moved, once I finished my AmeriCorps membership, started a position at the Vera Institute of Justice, which is a criminal justice research and policy organization. And they really do kind of programming and policy, which is where I wanted to be, kind of like that sweet spot of actually developing programs and policies and then executing it. So as a special assistant to the chief program officer, I was able to have like a purview of pretty much all of the programs, all of the centers, and the work that Vera was doing. Worked on kind of a few different things. One of the things that I was most proud of was this event series that we started that I chaired that was basically aimed at not only educating our employees on trends, but also making the public aware of the work that we were doing, and then giving a platform for notable academics, researchers, speakers in the criminal justice space. And Vera has changed a lot since I've been there. I was there for almost 4 years, but it's grown tremendously. The work that they're doing is really amazing. A lot of reform work when it comes to the criminal justice system. And then while I was there, I heard about corporate social responsibility and became really interested in it and wasn't sure how to pursue it because it was still this very new field, and a lot of companies have or had like a philanthropic branch, but it was very small, it was ad hoc, it was kind of, whatever the owner or the CEO was interested in, that's what they were making grants for. Or it was something that people who were within the company didn't want to retire would move into CSR or philanthropy. But there was this kind of like shift to a more strategic paradigm happening when I was looking into it. And then as my time at Vera was winding down, I actually started my master's program at the same time and decided to go into public administration, really like the Baruch program, and that there are a lot of instructors. The instructors were practitioners as well. And that's what I really wanted. I wanted like people who were doing this work so they could explain like the practical application of the theories that we were learning or the frameworks that we were kind of unpacking. and I applied for a graduate internship at Jpmorgan Foundation. So Jpmorgan Foundation was going through that shift that I was talking about, but that kind of like the ad hoc philanthropy grant making to this very strategic focus on aligning their grant making or just their social impact programs with their business. And so I came at a really interesting time because they were building out a lot of stuff and trying to figure out what their pillars would be. They're like the pillars that they were going to be focusing on and what they wanted to be known for. I mean, it's JP Morgan Chase, so obviously they're the leader in the space. They also wanted to be a thought leader in the social impact space as well. So I joined as a global philanthropy intern. I worked pretty closely on their workforce development program, which was about helping. It was interesting. It was helping businesses look at their job descriptions a little more closely and define. Usually, what would happen is that companies would come up with these job descriptions, and for education, just like put 4-year degrees without actually looking at whether or not you needed a 4-year degree for these jobs. But that would obviously cut out like a huge labor force because you're requiring a 4-year degree for something that you probably just need like a certification for. So we were challenging companies to look at their job descriptions a little more closely, and then also creating a pipeline with schools to kind of fill those jobs of the teacher. So do you really need a 4-year degree, or do you need like a 2-year certification course in this? And if that's the case, let's work with schools to create those programs that help either low to moderate income individuals and families kind of prep them for the jobs of the future. So that was workforce development. I also worked in their summer youth employment program that they had piloted out in Chicago that was really successful, and then also helped create a grant, working on there. They just started up this like grant administration program. So I helped stand that up for them as well. It was a great look into how companies were moving forward and kind of setting up the stage for what social impact and sustainability is now at a lot of companies. But I wanted to pull back because I had just come from, this nonprofit experience. Wasn't sure what I really wanted to do, but was offered this position at a small family foundation that was kind of still in startup mode, but it would allow me to do. There was a tremendous growth potential. So I ended up taking a special projects manager position at the Bob Woodruff Foundation, which is a veteran service organization. It's headed by Bob Woodruff, who's a journalist, and Lee Woodruff, his wife, who's also a journalist. And there did everything, and was special projects, operations, portfolio initiatives. They have this huge gala. It's a 3-day gala that ends with a concert and comedy show at Madison Square Garden. That's the first night of the New York Comedy Festival. Ran that for a number of years. Actually, we acquired a brand, built out in this brand launch, and built up the programming for this brand that would be under our umbrella. A number of other NGO partnerships that we had, built those out. Still was really interesting. I knew that whenever I decided to take my next step, it would be back in corporate social responsibility. And corporate social responsibility, or CSR, is a very outdated term. A lot of companies are moving away from it. I totally forgot to mention this, I'm now at Estee Lauder companies within the global corporate citizenship and sustainability function. My title right now is strategic initiatives. I'll be actually, my role is transitioning as the function has grown. I'll be now working on brand social impact and education. I'll go into that in a little bit. Found this wonderful opportunity at Estee Lauder companies. I had a friend who made a referral. That's also a great way to get into these roles, and started there 2 years ago, August 2019. So the way our function is set up is that it's sustainability is one pillar, social impact, or what they call citizenship right now, and we're transitioning to social impact. Citizenship is another pillar, and then strategy, where I sit, straddles both. And so I work very closely with our ESG team, our environmental and what does ESG stand for? I should know this. It's environmental and social governance.
Social and governance.
Yeah. Right. So I work very closely. I know the acronyms. That's about as far as I can go. But I work very closely with them on building out all goal governance around all of our ESG public and internal goals. So when I had joined, we had, Estee Lauder had announced a number of public environmental sustainability and social impact goals that the company would reach in the next 5 years. What they hadn't done was built out how they were going to track their progress and how they were going to be measuring their progress. And so that's what I work on with the ESG team, is building up this goal governance model. So how are we tracking? What are our KPIs? What are our metrics? How are we tracking it? Does the language of the goal actually make sense with what we're trying to achieve? While I've been here, we've actually changed two of our goals, the language for it, to make sure that we're actually working towards what we want to achieve at the end of the day. And we've also we've developed and announced a number of goals since then. We've actually sunsetted a couple of goals that we achieved early, including our net zero and RE100 goals. We've also achieved our packaging goal, one of our packaging goals early. So we have 3 huge packaging goals around using, basically reducing our use of virgin plastic, certain types of plastic, reducing that. We've achieved one of our goals early and are announcing a new percentage target for that. So lots of stuff that's going on. ELC is a huge company. It's multinational, it's global, it's $1 billion corporation. We own a number of brands that you're probably all very familiar with. And so there's a lot of work to be done with our brands as well. So the ESG piece, or the goal governance piece, is a big part of my work. I also work on embedding social impact and sustainability with our brands and regions. Like I mentioned, we have a lot of brands in a lot of different countries, and working with them to embed social impact and sustainability into their business philosophy. So it's not just this thing that they do on the side that's like a marketing claim, but it is also something that they really think about as they're rolling out new products or starting a new campaign or whatever it is. So there's a lot of education that goes along with that. And then recently with the Black Lives Matter movement, last summer, Estee Lauder created a racial equity task force. So I project managed the external engagement pillar of that task force. A lot of it is around our NGO partnerships, our engagement strategy with NGOs, and also embedding a racial equity lens within our grant making. So it's not something that's on the side, it's baked and bred into our grant making. And so now what we're doing is we've kind of worked ourselves out of a job a little bit within strategy. And so the goal governance piece is kind of now up and running and functioning, and we're actually hiring somebody who can really maintain that. I didn't have any expertise in ESG when I first came on, so it was like a crash course in figuring all this out and building the plane while we're flying it. And so now that that has been stood up, I'm moving towards, like I said, the education piece and helping brands really embed social impact. And when I say social impact, it's not just what you think of your traditional philanthropy. It also includes environmental sustainability, because climate change disproportionately affects Black and Brown communities. So we want our brands to be thinking about that as part of their social impact campaigns and whatnot. So that's where I am today. That's my career trajectory, mainly a nonprofit, and then made this transition into CSR, or social impact and sustainability, at a for-profit company. And very excited about the ways in which ELC has moved forward in the past 2 years that I've been there, and also just what we have going on in the next few years. A lot of we've made tremendous amount of progress in the couple of years that I've been there, and I feel like we have a lot of really interesting, exciting things coming up in the future. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Faiza. That was wonderful. All right, Pam, it's up to you now.
All right, thank you, Samantha. Thanks, Faiza. My story is very similar to Faiza's in some ways, in that it's a hybrid of time in the nonprofit sector and time in the private sector. And I think what unites all of that are a few common values, interests, things I kind of nerd out about. that keeps me moving in a certain direction, which I would not describe as a ladder. And if you're thinking about your career, whether you're kind of on your path already, or whether you are like just at the beginning, you know, you went straight to undergrad and then grad school, and now you're going to move out in the world, like, don't worry so much about a ladder is my advice to you. And I think Faiza's story is another great example of that. Like, my path is very nonlinear. It's more like a lattice. You know, I have kind of gone for things that interest me at the time that I'm making a decision, and that maybe I've had some trade-offs along the way where I haven't gotten like the highest title fastest or the most authority fastest, but I've never been bored and I've always been employed. So let me tell you a little bit about how I got there. First of all, let me start by saying I'm 50. So I've been at this game a while. Like, I've been working a long time, got 30 years of work under my belt. And had you asked me when I was just finishing college in 1993 as an English major, would I be ending up like where I am today? I mean, it wasn't a thing yet, to Faiza's point. It was like maybe some people were doing divestment around like apartheid, you know, but that was about it. There wasn't really a big practice around sustainability or social responsibility. We're starting to recycle and compost on campus then, but beyond that, it wasn't part of our language. So I never could have predicted this. The other thing to know about me is that I'm from Pittsburgh, PA. I don't know if you know anything about Pittsburgh, but you know, it was a steel town until it wasn't. So when I was growing up there in the 80s, the steel industry was collapsing. And as a result, like 26% of my county was unemployed when I was in the upper end of elementary school, like 4th or 5th, 6th grade. And that was reflected in my own classroom. Like, I remember my teacher, Ms. D. Dominicus, asking us, like, who in our class has at least one parent laid off from the mills? And like, literally, I can remember looking around and seeing like definitely at least like a quarter of the kids in my class. And then she asked, well, how many have two parents laid off? And I could think there were like probably 8 or 9 kids who had two parents laid off from the mills. So that's where I'm from. I probably grew up in a place where like I didn't really know a lot of professionals. Like, my friend's dad was a repo man for the bank. I don't know if that counts, or like worked, you know, her mom worked as a teller in the bank, but like, I didn't know people who went to graduate school, apart from my own dad who went to divinity school, which is a different kind of altogether a different agenda. I didn't know like that you could work in finance. Like, these things weren't on my radar at all. What I knew was you took care of your community, you looked out for each other, you worked hard, and jobs were great to have, but you might not necessarily count on them. And I can look back now and see perhaps that has probably influenced like my expectations of corporate America and kind of drives the work that I do today. But again, couldn't have known that then. So graduated from college. By the time I graduated, there was sort of a revival going on in the Pittsburgh region, and a lot of attention and philanthropic funds going to community revitalization, economic development at both the regional level and the neighborhood level. And shortly after I graduated, I ended up working in that field. So early part of my career, like first 10 years of my career, I worked in small nonprofits, small and mid-sized nonprofits, doing like regional economic development around how do we rebuild the manufacturing base in Western Pennsylvania, how do we rebuild the or start sort of life sciences innovation in Western Pennsylvania, how do we build university partnerships, like working in organizations that were trying to catalyze that kind of economic impact at a regional level to lift up the economy and replace what, you know, disappeared, all the jobs and quality of life that disappeared when the steel mills collapsed. Then I got into doing that at the neighborhood level. So working in a neighborhood of 11,000 people, kind of like Faiza was describing, like really small, like there were 3 people on our staff at one point. And I was running a business district revitalization program that was based around like, how can we get more people interested in this vacant, boarded up business district if we turn it into an arts community? And it was great. It's like I used my little bit of private sector marketing experience to try to apply it to a neighborhood level. And I had my, you know, steering committee and people that got together, all these artists and small business owners. Like, it was exciting to be part of this group of creative people wanting to make change in their neighborhood and become like owners. So it wasn't like just something that they did all the change and then someone else came in and made all the money off of it. Like it was really about putting sweat equity into their buildings and encouraging ownership while the neighborhood was still really affordable. Loved that work. What that work taught me mostly was that I was really interested in measuring the impact of things that are hard to measure. So when Faiza's talking about like, we had goals and now we look at those goals and I'm not sure if those goals make any sense when we align them with standards or we really try to map it out to the impact and our theory of change. Like all of that stuff was new to me. I didn't learn it as an English major, but it was incredibly exciting. It's just like where I plug in and nerd out. It gets me, it's intellectually engaging for me. So did that work, really enjoyed it. Family reasons, that my husband ended up getting a job in Atlanta, moved to Atlanta, then moved to New York for his work, which is eventually what led me to Baruch. By that time, I had gone back to the private sector. In part, full disclosure, was like, I wanted somebody else to chip into my 401k plan. I'd been like was self-employed, doing nonprofit strategic planning for a while, and thought, you know, I need some great health insurance and I need someone to chip into my 401k. So I thought I'll go into the private sector for 3 years. I got a job at this company called Gartner. They're really well known as like a research and advisory services firm. We help, they help in sort of corporate executives make decisions through research and it's kind of like coaching, but not quite. It's research-based advice. And I thought I'm just going to go for 3 years, get their name on my resume, and then get out and go on my own again. What I didn't know when I got there was that I would move from being a writer at Gartner's research practice to becoming an analyst, which meant that I got to conduct my own research and that I got to interface with clients like chief supply chain officers and their direct reports at very large organizations like Intel and HP and Procter & Gamble and Colgate-Palmolive and Johnson & Johnson. And I did not know that I would be given an assignment to figure out like how to rate and score companies on their sustainability or CSR, to use the old term that Faiza was talking about, to rate them on their performance as part of this, like, this sounds so nerdy, this like top 25, like supply chain top 25 that we did every year, where we analyzed and rewarded companies on their supply chain performance. So I was given this task of like, you know, which was exciting to me because, you know, I love figuring out how do you measure things that are difficult to measure. But for me, that was like Faiza, like didn't know anything about this, was given this assignment and said, this is interesting because like, it's all the stuff I was trying to make happen when I worked at a nonprofit and was going and knocking on doors of corporations, trying to get them to give me money so I could do things. Now the companies are trying to have an impact in that way. And, you know, I learned about sustainability. I learned about how institutional investors were starting to route companies in this direction. I learned what CSR meant. I learned what the UN Global Compact was and GRI and SASB and all of these scoring frameworks and models. And I had to kind of figure it out myself. That in part was what led me to go back and get my MPA very late in my career, definitely like mid-career professional going back to school. I think Baruch was a great place to make that happen. I love the campus and the campus community. I loved meeting, like I felt like I was really part of New York when I was there. And as an outsider, that was really meaningful to me. Like, yes, this is where New York people are and I'm here too. So that makes me a New Yorker. I love my professors. Carla Robbins, if you get to take a class with her, I was in her sort of, what did we call it? Capstone class, and loved the experience. She's tough, but you will have a good capstone project as a result of it. And I have to say, everything I learned at Baruch, in my MPA program, I put into practice in one form or another, even like my communications class, like just being mindful of like how communications works, like everything I learned, I have put into practice in some form or another in my work life. So finished my degree, continued to progress. And this is sort of another takeaway I would give you, like, don't worry too much about the ladder. And the other would be like, create your own opportunities. So, you know, they gave me this initial project to figure out like, how would we score companies on their sustainability performance as part of supply chain top 25? And as I learned, I thought, this is something really interesting. And I really think there's going to be more demand for services around this topic in the future from our customers. Like, they're not coming to us now because we're not offering it. It's like saying, well, none of our customers want eggplant parm. And it's like, well, because you only have spaghetti on the menu. Like, let's put the eggplant parm on the menu and see if they'll actually come and order it up. So my boss, or my boss's boss, like, gave me just enough room to like move and experiment and try some things to see if we could start getting some interest. Like, you know, she somehow maneuver it so I would be able to, at a conference, like do a presentation on sustainability or circular economy. Or she would give me a special assignment where I could like corral my team members and help create a whole package of research on sustainability and circular economy. So it wasn't like someone said, hey, here's a big budget, go make magic things happen. We have faith in you. It was like, well, maybe, why don't you give it a try and see what you can make? So seize those opportunities when you have them, because it will lead to something. So I did that for several years, progressed at Gartner, got some nice promotions, got to meet really interesting people from around the world, really, in different corporate sustainability roles, and then decided I wanted to do it myself. Like, it's one thing to advise and coach, it's another to go in, and Faiza knows this, I'm sure, to be inside a corporation trying to help them make decisions differently and to come up with a strategy and execute on that strategy. So I saw an opportunity at Macy's, which I'm sure as New Yorkers you're all familiar with. And it was a vice president of sustainability. It was the first time they'd hired someone in a leadership role. So I went for it. I was lucky. Also, like Faiza, I knew somebody in the company. I knew their chief diversity officer for years. So I asked her, like, what do you think? And she's like, let me see if I can get your resume into the right hands. Because it came from her, they gave me a look. I'm not sure they would have otherwise, because I didn't have anything on my job that said, like, I'm a senior director of sustainability. I wasn't on my resume, but I got in, made the case that I deserved the job and got the job, and it was great, right? So my responsibilities there included coming up with like a strategy. There was none when I got there. There were a lot of people who were super passionate about sustainability, scattered across the organization, all doing things like on the side of their desk, which is a common term you'll hear when you hear people kind of talking in corporate context of like how they're sustainable. Well, we have a lot of passionate people doing this on the side of their desk. What that means is there's no budget, there's no centralized decision making, there's a lot of passion, but no real connection to a business case. People are doing the best they can to keep things alive, but aren't really getting the support you need to really integrate it in the business and accelerate things. So I came in, I met a lot of people, I started formulating a strategy, I did some benchmarking, and I was overseeing things like, how do we market sustainable products in a way that our customers can have confidence that they're actually buying something sustainable? So developing a roadmap of how we're going to roll out sustainable products, working with our brand partners like Estee Lauder, who we talked to many times during the course of my time at Macy's, to figure out, how do we work together? How do we make this happen? I oversaw responsible sourcing. So Macy's has private label brands. They manufacture their own clothing, apparel, footwear, footwear, accessories. That's mostly done in factories overseas. So how can we have confidence that the people who work in those factories and the environmental impact of those factories meets our standards of our code of conduct and of, upholding human rights and functioning as good environmental citizens. So overseeing the auditing program for that and restructuring that auditing program to make it gives better visibility into conditions on the ground around the world in these factories. And then also ESG disclosure. So, the changing expectation is that companies are going to share more and more and more information about not just what do you do and what do you sell, but like, how do you do it? Who's involved in decision making? How do those decisions get made? What are the results of those decisions? What are your areas of impact? What is your composition of your board of directors? How diverse are they? What about your management? What about your employees? How much training and development do you give them? There's just an increasing demand for data, which I geek out on the data and how we measure these difficult things. So there's this increasing demand for data about how companies work and what they do and what they're claiming, to Faiza's point, like if we're making a claim, can we actually back that up? right? Are we providing that transparency and data that everyone can be confident and feels like it's meaningful data, it's measuring the right things, and that we believe it's trustworthy data? So I was responsible for overseeing, well, what is our plan for releasing this data out into the public domain? Like, do we participate in ratings programs? Are we publishing a sustainability report and what needs to be in it? And how do we communicate all of that? The other thing that I did not think I would be doing when I got there, it just wasn't something that occurred to me that I was even capable of doing, was meeting with the Macy's board of directors on a quarterly basis to give them updates on where do we stand, what are the issues they need to be concerned about, and how are we progressing on execution of our strategy, as well as meeting with Macy's investors. So large, like your BlackRocks and your State Street, getting together with them and giving them the story of here's our strategy, where are we going, what are we doing, what's our performance like in these key areas. All experiences, like, again, if you'd asked me back in 1993 when I graduated with an English degree, like what I was going to be doing, never would have anticipated it. But I feel like it is exactly the kind of work I love doing. I feel like I get to work in the corporate sphere, but in a way that reflects the things that I care about, and that hopefully prevents like another type of just industry collapse like my communities went through when I was growing up, because that stuff lasts a long time. It gets me kind of emotional to think about it. So in any case, that's who I am. I don't think I would be able to do this work if I didn't have the education I had at Baruch, and I'm really happy to be connected with you today. So I guess we can open it up to questions, Samantha. Sorry, I get real choked up when I talk about where I'm from and what we went through and how it all connects back. And I'm just like Faiza, I think like really optimistic that like this kind of work will make a difference. And if there are enough of us starting to like steer the ship in the right direction, that within our lifetime, by the time I retire, and Faiza's probably got more years towards that retirement than I do. So Faiza, I'm handing that torch to you. But like by the time we retire, like business will function differently. That's what I'm hopeful for.
Thank you so much, Pam.
Who's going to join us? Who's on?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, we'll absolutely open it up to questions now from all of you. Feel free to raise your hand. We'll unmute you, or you can take your time and write it in the chat and we can say it out. Just so I have an understanding, so CSR is actually the outdated term for ESG. They're not necessarily separate, correct? Or go into that.
Yeah, I mean, so you can definitely still search CSR, but companies are like Estee Lauder really moving away from that. We've gone through so many different iterations of what my function's new. It's just, I think, 2.5, 3 years old, but just what we've called it internally has changed so much. Before it was CSR, then it was just social responsibility, then it was our sustainability report, then it was like SR progress, and now it's, when I joined, it was global corporate citizenship and sustainability, and now we're moving to social impact and sustainability. So there are different companies call it different things. We were calling it citizenship for so long. It depends on the industry as well. So CSR is kind of a little bit outdated. I would say social impact and sustainability, or ESG, are really the more, I think, contemporary terms for it. But Pam, let me know. Yeah,
I'll just add on to that quickly. I think there was a pivot that largely was led by the investor community. And when I say the investors, I mean like these big institutional investors that allocate like billions of dollars of capital to companies. So they own, like when I look at who owns Macy's, like, BlackRock owns almost 10% of Macy's, State Street, Fidelity. Like if you look at a company's shareholders, those are the owners, and they're the ones who have really shifted the conversation from, great, your CSR stuff is nice, but I think to Faiza's point, that was largely getting conflated with like corporate giving and philanthropy, which is lovely, right? I guess like you don't pay taxes and then you give money away to things that you want to give money to. Like, sure, there's a great role for corporate philanthropy, but that's not re-engineering how business works to account for its externalities. So I think what the investors started talking about was long-term value first. Right? We're interested in companies being able to perform well over the long term. And in order to do that, you need to be paying attention to different risk factors than you do today. You need to look at your environmental impact and, importantly, the impact that climate change is going to have on your business. So if Estee Lauder is trying to figure out, like, well, we need to build 20 new distribution centers to keep up with our growth, should we put them all in Florida in the path of, like, more frequent hurricanes? Probably not, right? So it's accounting for that in your corporate decision making. The social stuff, again, like, where do we have an impact and where does that have an impact on us? So, oh, wow, people are actually, like, so vocal about their concerns about diversity that we actually need to do something about that and acknowledge that we are integrating that into how we make hiring decisions, how we make marketing decisions, and who is included in our ad campaigns and our sizes and our skin tones available in our cosmetics. Like, all of that gets factored into business decisions versus, we run the business and then we give money over here. So I think that has really, the investor piece has led the shift to ESG. And I think Faiza's totally right. Like, you'll find CSR stuff out there, but it's just less talked about than since, like, I would say this has happened since 2015, 16.
Yeah, it's fairly new. And I think the last 2 years, especially with the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, there's a mandate now, right? To Pam's point, like, that's something that I've been trying to be better about, is making the business case when you're working in this field that's seen as kind of like, it's a nice thing to do. Like, no, we have to do it now. And so aligning, like, you're having, making that business case and what are our business priorities and how do we make sure that this all ladders up so that it's not, aside somebody working off the side of their desk, because that happened a lot. That's what was going on at ELC before they stood this function that I now work, but that's now grown tremendously. I was employee number 15. We're now at 40 something, and now we're hiring people in the regions to carry this work out. So making the business case is definitely something I think that'll help you in the long run. I didn't really understand that when I first joined, because I was like, I'm coming from nonprofit. This is the business. And so being able to, like, speak that language, I'm actually onboarding some consultants for our racial equity work, because we recognize we don't have that expertise in-house. And so we need to bring that on. And that was something that we were really looking for, as we were really committed to making sure there were Black-owned, Black-led firms. Can you speak corporate speak? Are you able to stand up in front of our board of directors for the foundation and make that business case for us? So that was something really important, and it goes a long way. Really understanding what are our business priorities and how do we make sure that the work that we're doing within social impact and sustainability makes sense to our shareholders and our investors. And investors are very invested in this. I can't think of a better term, but they want to see this progress, which is why we have our social impact and sustainability report, and that is a months-long process getting all that data. And that was one of the reasons why we had to really build up this goal governance process as soon as possible, because we needed metrics to back up what we were saying. We couldn't just say, oh, we donate all this money. Like, philanthropy is just one part of social impact and sustainability. There's a lot of other things that go along with it. And when it comes to your supply chain, when it comes to, employee engagement and skills-based volunteerism and all of that stuff, it's much broader than people think it is.
I should add onto that data piece so I didn't describe where I work now. So I left Macy's in July and came to work at a software startup called OneTrust. It's based in Atlanta. And what we're doing is creating software to help manage all of that ESG data. So pulling it in from across the enterprise, making sense of it, normalizing it so companies can report out on it. So I guess I should mention where I am now. Like, the journey still continues in a different place.
Yes, I actually love what you said about, like, thinking about your career as a lattice as opposed to a ladder. I think that's absolutely something I'm going to take in my career as well. So while we wait for questions to come in, I can keep going. So in both your experiences, what are the biggest differences in ESG sustainability? And I'll throw in CSR just because we're talking with like an all-encompassing term. What's the difference between the private and public sectors, or I guess private and nonprofit sectors?
I'll go quickly, but I think Faiza's going to have some fresh information here. I think Faiza already mentioned one. I think when you work in a nonprofit, the mission and the purpose is at the center of everything. And when you get to a private sector organization, making money is the purpose of everything. And you have to work, and I think this is shifting a little bit, but it's always going to be making money is everything. And you have to like work at helping to expand the company's sense of what is possible in terms of, you know, a greater purpose. And I think purpose is a word that's starting to enter the corporate vernacular a lot more now. That started a couple of years ago with like the business roundtables statement about stakeholder capitalism and Larry Fink's letter about purpose in like 2019. But I think that's a big part of it. I think the other is like I think sometimes when I was in the nonprofit sector, I assumed like, oh, in a corporation, there's just lots of money. Like there's more money, but there's still a sense of resource scarcity. And I think it depends on like where you are, like what industry you're in, what's happening, but like there's not endless money. So it's still a competition, whereas like in the nonprofit sector, you have to go knock on other people's doors to get the money. Like in the private sector, you still have to do a lot of, you know, relationship building and business case building to get access to the resources you need to execute something. I don't know, those are two things that stand out to me. Faiza, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with nonprofits, you're beholden to your funders. With for-profit, you're beholden to your investors, right? And your consumers. And so sometimes those are competing interests, and you have to be able to balance that. And you're absolutely right, Pam. Like purpose is a new term that's entered the lexicon. Something that we recently introduced to our company is intersectionality. And that was something that took a while because they're like, what is that? And I'm like, okay, this is something that like you should really learn. You know, we want to like talk about things, especially when it comes to our grant making. We want to be able to talk about it in those terms. And so it's now become part of our, and that was like, you know, just last year we introduced that term, our team. And now it's taken on a life of its own really with our brands and our corporate structure. But I think that's the difference. You definitely do have more access to resources when you're working in for-profit. It's about recognizing how you can manipulate those resources, which sounds a little gross, but you have to learn how to make that business case. You have to learn how to you're working with stakeholders who understand the business side of things, but not necessarily why this is important, and you have to bring them along that journey and be able to make a really concise argument for why this is important and how it helps the bottom line, because at the end of the day, you are a for-profit company and you need to be able to do that. I think there are companies that are able to put purpose over profit. That's something we've heard a lot, like you have Patagonia's and Ben & Jerry's, a lot of younger brands. You know, I'm in the beauty industry, so a lot of younger beauty brands are able to do that. You know, we're not going to sell in China because they use third parties to test on animals, so they just don't sell. ELC is a little bit different because we're very large and we own a number of brands, and so that's something that we are learning how to do, and also giving our brands agency to make that call for themselves. So I think it's just a different set of stakeholders, but really it's kind of the same game.
Can I add something onto that? I love what you had to say, Faiza. It makes total sense. And I do think it is, you're always beholden to someone. If I could add something on, that is like I think there's a myth in the for-profit sector that I felt when I was making the switch, was that if you're in a nonprofit, you're not as results focused, which is like, come on, we all know this, girl. So like, if you are trying to make that switch, don't walk in talking about mission. Like if you're trying to move from a nonprofit role into a private sector role, walk in, yes, tell them about the mission of the organization, but focus on the results that you achieved while you were at that nonprofit. And it could be an internal, like, I made this process more efficient so we could serve more people, or it could be the change you made out in the world, but focus on results. And I think the other thing is there's a myth that like change happens slowly in the nonprofit sector because you're not results driven, that everyone's like sitting around getting to consensus and not really like that's slow in the corporate sector too. So one thing they have in common is like change is hard. So if you've learned something about making change, go in and lead. If you want to make that switch, go lead with that story, or vice versa. If you want to go private to nonprofit, talk about change, talk about results orientation. They're in common. So I see we have some questions.
Yeah, so we have a couple hands. So I saw Gail's, and then I saw Anna's, and I saw Josh's. So we'll go in that order. So go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, I was just wondering to what extent your daily responsibilities in the field are towards, helping societal problems, environmental sustainability, or, justice, racial, social justice, etc., on a bigger scale by, donating, getting involved, doing brand initiatives along those lines, or how much is it about doing all this to build the brand and protect the brand and make more money for the brand?
Yeah.
Like what's the focus?
Can I give you just a brief perspective on what I learned from when I was at Gartner? I was doing research on this, which is not like a particular company, but many companies talking to. There's a journey, I think, that companies go on. And when you're just starting your like sustainability, CSR, ESG programs, like the way to get traction internally is often looking for win-wins. Where, for example, if we like cut our energy costs, which is great for the environment, right? Or if we minimize our dependency on non-renewable energy sources, can we also save money? Well, that's in the interest of it's a win-win. The company wins, the environment wins. So I think that's a typical starting place where you're either looking for things that are good for the business in another way. Like in terms of human rights, like you're trying to mitigate risks, reputational risks and financial risks that come from working with suppliers who have like lame, the sort of worker, like lame treatment of their workers, whether it's underpayment, poor factory conditions, etc. So it's always going to start, I think, with, at least from my research, to determine, is this legit, or is this just a branding exercise? Like your degree should have given you the tools to suss that out.
Yeah, claims is a huge thing at ELC because we've seen other companies and other brands get in trouble for the claims that they've made without having actually done the work. I will say, to Pam's point, we have a mandate from our CEO when it comes to sustainability and investing in sustainable products, not just the products that we sell, but also the materials that we use. So we just did a presentation. I just had one of my colleagues do a presentation on sustainable like testers. They cost a little bit more, but we know in the long run that the environmental impact means so much more than 20 cents more for this, stick or whatever it is. So that we're lucky that we have this mandate from our CEO, who really understands that this is long-term. We're looking not just 5, 10, 20 years out, and that eventually the world will shift and these things will become commonplace and hopefully cheaper, right? But I think that, to Pam's point about when it comes to energy saving, we know that that's a cost that we'll be saving on that at the end of the day. So that's kind of an easy win for us. A lot of my work is around helping brands. One of the things that I manage is our brand cause goal, which is that all of our brands will have a social or environmental cause that they champion by 2025. And that means that could be in very different ways, financially, whether they're donating, whether they have employee engagement initiatives around that, whether they, there's so many different ways that they can support this cause that we've outlined. And so I'm helping our brands build that out. And that is driven by what their consumers think is important. So what is your brand known for? If it's known for clean beauty, don't go into, animal welfare, right? Just like focus on clean beauty. That's what you're known for. That's what you should invest in. And then we'll help you build out that not just the campaign, but also the structures you're inside to make sure that you're able to carry that forward, and that's your long-term cause, and that's what you're known for in the space. So a lot of my work is around that. Like I mentioned, I'm part of the Racial Equity Task Force, and that is a huge lift for us. We've made a lot of progress, not enough progress, of course, but I think this is an ever-evolving space. And so it's definitely changed the way the company has looked at equity, racial equity and diversity. And we're also challenging our brands to do the same. So it's slow and steady in some regard, but it's also, I think the last 2 years, like I said, has accelerated a lot of this. There's a mandate, we have to do this work. A lot of it is putting purpose over profit. And I think companies are starting to see that our consumers are really savvy. They know how to look things up. They know how to do research. They're talking to each other. There's so many apps now where you can look up how sustainable a company actually is. We had the Pull Up or Shut Up campaign that really challenged companies to put out their demographics, like how many of your VPs are people of color or women of color. And so consumers have a lot of leverage here, and they can really pull back the curtain and drive a lot of that change and dictate how quickly it happens.
Great. And I know you had a question, so go ahead.
I did. Thank you so much. How do partnerships feature in your respective companies' sustainability agendas, and in particular partnerships with the public and nonprofit sector? Thank you.
Mine's real quick. It'll take 2 seconds. That is, I'm at the very beginning of developing our strategy here at OneTrust, our internal ESG strategy. They're going to be essential for multiple reasons, but I have not identified what those are yet. I'm kind of landing on that now.
It's a kind of a work in progress for us as well, but I will say that for at least our social impact nonprofit partnerships, ELC has a rich history in women and women's health and women's education, and we have this huge breast cancer campaign that we do. So our NGO partnerships are really strong and have been for like decades when it comes to that. And we're building out a lot of our partnerships around environmental and racial equity work. So we're also doing a lot of work around supplier diversity and working with NGOs that would help inform a lot of that work for us. So it is, at least from my seat, that's a lot of the work that I do is helping build out those nonprofit partnerships, whether it's for our brands or for corporate.
Great. Josh, go ahead.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you, Faiza and Pam, for coming to speak to us today. My question was, as someone who is trying to transition to the ESG field, what technical or hard skills or even certifications that you have employed would you recommend for someone in that position?
Josh, do you have any sense, like ESG and sustainability are both massive? Is there, I think what's going to help you is understanding, is there a particular area that interests you? Like, do you want to get into the reporting piece? Because you can get some certifications around reporting. You can get GRI, you can get SASB. Is human rights the thing that super excites you? You want to be a champion of human rights inside a company. Well, then you can look at like, are there certain things around human rights? So I think, do you have a sense of like where within the big umbrella really interests you?
Yeah, personally, like energy and resource efficiency is where I'd like to go personally.
Yeah, I would start by just saying, okay, well, within that, like, you know, is it LEED buildings? Do you want to learn more about LEED buildings? Or is it about some energy? I have to say I'm not an energy person. I was an English major, but like you could, I would narrow it that way. Faiza, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. Like I said, I work very closely with our ESG team. I'm not an ESG person, but that is something like, yeah, carbon offsets is a huge strategy that we employ. So understanding that, I think it's very much like what area you want to focus on, and then looking at the certifications within that, because there's so many different ways you can go for it. I think as long as you have like strong analytical and data skills, that'll help you a long way. And then there are a ton of certifications or just courses you can take to build out your knowledge and content knowledge to pursue that for sure. And there are a lot of stuff, there's like Pam mentioned, there are a lot of softwares that are now out there. We use, it was called SoFi, now it's called Sphero. I think that's what we use to track all of our progress. So some, yeah, like if you have some software-based knowledge, that is helpful, or just like know of the different softwares that are out there to manage that. I think that would be really helpful as well.
Wonderful. And then our last question, Ed, go ahead.
That's Lady, that's you.
Okay, sorry. I was interested to know if what you think about certifications and sustainability reporting. So I've been looking at GRI and I've been looking at SASB, but I don't know if it's important in the first place for the job market, and two, if I should do it, which one, because I don't want to do both. So yeah, I just wanted to ask if it's something that you've come across.
Yes. So, and I'm doing SASB right now. So,
Oh.
but here's what I would advise you. I think what we're going to see in the next few months is the actually within the next maybe 4 weeks, the unleashing of the first kind of global sustainability reporting standard from ISRF. That will be set. The first wave is going to be SASB based. The next wave will be GRI based. I would say pick the one that's affordable. Pick the one that fits within your lifestyle. Do that one. Tell your employer to be happy to do another one if they pay for it. Like, just start somewhere to demonstrate I know something, but both of those are going to have a place in the reporting ecosystem, I think. And keep your eye on like the news that's coming out around COP26 in a couple of weeks around reporting standards.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faiza and Pam, for a very informative session. We would love to have you. Just to be mindful of everyone's time, it is just a little past 1 p.m. So thank you so much. Faiza, Pam, and would it be, we'll definitely follow up with everyone here. Would students be able to reach out to you if they have any questions? We can definitely provide an email follow-up if that's okay with you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
LinkedIn connections.
Awesome.
Any friends of Baruch are friends of mine.
That's great to hear.
Thanks
That's
for
great
all
to-
coming today.
Of course. Thank you all
Yeah, I
so
really
much.
appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Of course. Everyone have a great rest of your Wednesday or Tuesday. Time doesn't exist in the pandemic. Have a good one, everyone.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you,
Bye-bye.
Suzanne.